And that's kind of this sort of magic. This sort of, it was so effortless. Things aren't always like that, are they? In terms of projects,
it never
as
happens
in
like
life.
that. Yeah, it never happens.
Often there are obstacles. Whereas, like, and also I remember us talking about, well, who should play Jerry, and that we had both thought of Charlie, and he wasn't originally available. Do you remember? And then
yes.
And then he then became available. It was almost like kind of, wow, this kind of karma of this is just kind of amazing.
It was extraordinary. Yeah, it never happens that way, where all the people you want to be involved, and it happens without, almost as if the road was already paved in some way. Extraordinary magic and a very auspicious beginning. And I can't believe it turned into almost a year and a half, or in terms of our preparation, but a full year of performance of this one singular play.
And over, I think it was like over 270.
272, I think it was. I may have misremembered that, but it was, yes, 12 weeks in London, 17 weeks in Broadway. And you know, to do the same thing 272 times is an extraordinary act of repetition and investigation, in that every time you do it, you find something else. Like playing a great piece of music, you think, oh, this movement is, by the way, I can't play great pieces of music, so I don't know why I've used this analogy, but
just keep going, keep going.
But it's taking little moments or little motifs or riffs, I suppose, that recur through the course of the piece. And I imagine in that repetitive recitation, you find more depth every time. And that's certainly my experience with this play, was that I would start to almost feel the structure. I would sort of feel the structure of the play like a physical entity. You feel like you're inside, you're under the hood, as it were, of the car. You're inside the engine. You just know exactly how the engine works. And the more time you spend with it, the more connections you can make. And that's the end of my mixed music and automobile metaphor.
Is it you? I don't think you had done Pinter before. I don't think you'd
been. No, I'd never done Pinter professionally. No, I'd done a bit at school.
Right. And were you surprised? Were there any particular demands? That, you know, being in a Pinter play, you know, what are the demands of being in a Pinter play? What does he require you to do? What was the kind of, what was interesting about doing his work?
Everything. I mean, he has an extraordinary ability to excavate under the surface of things, under the surface of words, actions, and behavior. And he, I think, is a very much a playwright, probably of the English psyche. I hope he wouldn't object to that. In fact, that's unfair. I think it's a human thing. It's beyond the national identity. But what I was thinking of when I said that is some playwrights, older playwrights, Elizabethan playwrights, where the meaning lies within the words. If you're doing a Shakespeare play, the characters tell you what they're feeling often, in the most beautiful poetry, and they say what they mean. Whereas Harold Pinter's characters, the meaning lies beneath what they say. Characters often don't say what they mean. They say something that's in conflict or contradiction of what they mean. And the great joy of playing Pinter is that you're doing both at the same time. So you're investigating the subtext, or as you and I used to call it, the subwoofer.
I love the subwoofer. It makes so much sense. The subwoofer,
yeah. But there's a bass line that underneath, to carry on my musical analogy, there's a bass line underneath everything, which you need as an actor to tune into, a kind of frequency of things that are under the surface, which are primal and deeply human. And they are about love and loss and grief and betrayal and power and desire, all these incredibly human things that we experience, and a part of the experience of being alive. And over the top of that subwoofer, that bass line, are these melodies and grace notes, which often are, you know, in contradiction of what the bass line is. which makes it very fascinating acting challenge, because you have to summon what's underneath. You have to summon the subtext, and it could be extraordinary pain, extraordinary loss or suffering. But you also have to play what's on top of it, which can often be very light, very dexterous, very civilized, very well-mannered, charming or comedic. So you know, at any moment in the pin to play, a character could be charming and menacing, or seductive and in retreat. Betrayal is painful as an experience, and there are all sorts of ways betrayal can emerge in your life. You can betray yourself, you can betray another, you can betray a lover or a friend, you can betray your ideals, you can betray someone's trust. And so there was already I think, I love that excitement of having to dig around in this very profound human feeling. And particularly Robert, what I always found in that first reading at the gala was that here was this incredibly controlled, on the surface at least, a very controlled, charming, collected man who was intelligent and professional. He was successful in his life, a respected publisher, and underneath the carapace or the facade of that composure is someone whose soul is completely shattered. And so the challenge was to present that, the mask of control, but also investigate the vulnerability behind the mask. And one of the big clues I always found was this conversation between Robert and Jerry in the fourth scene about whether boy babies or girl babies cry more. And there's one way of reading it, which is that, because at this point the audience knows that Robert knows that Jerry's had an affair with his wife, and so there's a lovely dramatic irony and tension between what's happening on stage and what's happening in the audience, and the audience is aware, like, what's Robert going to say, because he knows. And Jerry has come over to Robert's house, so there's this truth that's hanging in the air which hasn't been spoken, which is an affair with the woman upstairs or wherever she is. We never specified it. And Robert gives Jerry a drink, and that's right, she's just putting Ned to bed. So Emma is putting their son to bed, or is it their son? There's a paternity question in scene 5. You know, when he finds out the affair's been going on, he says, "How long?" And Emma says, 5 years. And Robert says, 5 years. Pause. Ned is 1 year old. So there's already a challenge to the actor. What does that mean? Robert has to do the math. Who's the father of our son? But in the previous scene, Emma's putting Ned to bed, and Robert decides to start discussion with Jerry about boy babies and girl babies. Isn't it true that boy babies cry more than girl babies? Wouldn't you say? And Jerry's a bit perplexed, certainly in Charlie's, my esteemed colleague's performance. He sort of doesn't understand why this interrogation is happening. But I always thought that was a clue about Robert. It's pinned to telling you that Robert, this boy baby, cries, and he cries painfully and deeply.